I'll start this eulogy with the story of another man's passing. A bit over 2 decades ago, another man passed away, Mick Robertson. He was a friend and colleague of Bruce Shepherd's. He was a close friend, and they both got a lot out of that friendship, but it was occasionally rocky. The last conversation they had was actually a shouting match. Still, it fell on Bruce to deliver a eulogy. Now, when Bruce sets out to do something, he would commit. He spent 5 days interviewing people, trying to catch the real Mick. He stayed up all night rehearsing it. The final result went for 20 minutes, delivered completely without notes, and the audience was rapt. He was so proud of that. People approached him afterwards and said, "I want you to do mine." And indeed, he delivered a few more after that. Bruce Shepherd, my father, won't be delivering any more eulogies. And in this way, and in so many other ways, he is one tough act to follow. To appreciate the breadth of the man, we need only look at the range of people in this room. His extended and blended family, his theatre friends from way back in Mackay, people who worked with him in Croker's or in Quintrex. There are other business leaders who he counted as mentors and friends, and representatives from numerous charities he supported. There's people he knew from this church and all the artistic endeavours in Brisbane that he was either part of or he enthusiastically supported. No doubt my dad was a multifaceted individual, but one of the dominant traits, he was a manager. He would seize any opportunity he could to bring people from different facets of his life together. And today, he's done an awesome job. Bruce's story begins in the North Queensland town of Mackay in 1943 with 3 older sisters, Marg, Dulcie and Jean. Right from an early stage, he came out as a performer. His first stage appearance was at the Eisteddfod at the age of 5. He won, of course. He was singing a funny novelty song. Now, a lot of kids like funny songs, but then grow out of it. My dad, he never did. He lived in the same house on Gordon Street for the whole of his childhood and went to the local state schools. He played cricket, but wasn't known for his athletic ability. It is quite telling that even though he was no good at sport, back then his classmates could recognise somebody who was a good manager of people. So in senior year, he was voted the house sports captain. He got a commerce degree from the University of Queensland. He didn't speak much about the coursework, but the extracurricular work was a big deal for him. He never let go of the performing arts. He was in 2 university choirs, Queensland University Musical Society and the Madrigal Group. Now the Madrigal Group is extra significant because here he met Elsa Butz Olsen, an equally driven individual who shared his passion for music. Also the woman that he would marry and share a 23-year marriage with. After completing his degree, he did what was expected of him. He moved back to Mackay to work with his father. He was never completely happy with his path. He was a young man full of confidence, and he wanted to know what he could do on his own. He never got to find out. Well, actually he did, but not for a few decades. Now, my grandfather, he wasn't from university. He started at James Croker's & Son and worked his way up to managing director after beginning as an errand boy. He had a strong personality, and so did Dad, and of course they batted heads. Bruce's management role grew in the company, but the fighting never stopped. It finally grew to a head when Bruce laid out an ultimatum. Either Grandpa had to stop coming in and let Bruce make decisions on his own, or Bruce was going to go and work somewhere else. The next day, my grandfather came in, packed up his pencils, and said, "Okay, it's yours." My father only recounted this story to me a few years ago, but he recounts it with gratitude. He respects how difficult the decision was for his father to make. He was very much liked and respected as a manager, and Croker's grew from strength to strength as a company under his management. Running businesses was a passion of his, and he did it well. When he talked to me about the businesses he was in, it was never about him. The things he got most enthused about were the individuals who worked there. He was a manager of managers, and it was all about putting the right person in the right job. One person who did work there was Bruce Drysdale. After seeing Dad last year, he wrote a letter to my sister. I'll just read a quick excerpt from it. He was a great role model. Everyone that worked at Croker's enjoyed their time there and all felt that they were appreciated. Respect, recognition and responsibility were understood and respected. Bruce was able to see through a lot, had a lot of common sense and was able to make some tough decisions. During this time, he lived in North Mackay, and he and Elsa had 2 children, myself and Susan. Growing up, I was aware of Croker's, but even more so, I was aware of his other passion, the performing arts. Music was always a part of each day. He constantly was playing the piano and singing. He loved an audience, but he didn't need one, he just liked doing it. He didn't even need a piano, he would just sing loudly, often in public, regardless of how the kids walking next to him felt about it. He did community theatre. In Mackay, there was the Mackay Musical Comedy Players. Their first production was in 1965 with The Boyfriend, and 22-year-old Bruce was in it. He played in countless more shows after that. I'll just mention a few. He was in The Mikado, playing Coco, the funny role, and Judith Anderson played opposite him as Katisha. Judith is singing in the choir today. I'm pointing this one out because 20 years later, St Andrews did The Mikado and he played the same part, with Meg Russell playing Katisha, and Meg's also singing today. He played Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, with Jeff McLean playing Colonel Pickering. With My Fair Lady, Bruce's mother passed away a few days before opening night, but he soldiered on and did an amazing performance. When he sang I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face, there were tears. He didn't just act, he directed as well, straight plays and musicals. He directed Fiddler on the Roof and actually travelled to New York to do a workshop on it beforehand. When he talked about theatre directing, he used the same passion that he spoke about business. It was always about putting people in the right places and watching them thrive. He was a performer, he was a director, and he's also been a patron of the arts, back then and all the way through. Back then he was involved with the Arts Council, which brought various shows of various kinds to Mackay. Our house had spare rooms and we often had travelling performers staying with us. It was a fun environment to grow up in. At the age of 41, Bruce and the Shepherd family moved from Mackay to Brisbane. The change was difficult. This 5-year period from 84 to 89 was what he referred to as the hardest time of his life. He still managed Croker's from afar, travelling to Mackay 3 days a week, but the travelling was wearing him down. Also, during this period, his 23-year marriage to Elsa came to an end. But in this time, he fostered new business and personal relationships. He planted seeds that will continue to grow for decades to come. He joined the YPO, the Young Presidents Association. There, he struck up relationships with managers of other businesses, and these relationships remained until his passing. The biggest impact to him was the YPO forum meetings, where he was part of a small group that would regularly meet and they would talk. They'd just talk about what they were doing, listen to one another, give each other advice about the businesses they were running. Another seed that he planted was that he started going to church again. He hadn't done that since high school. First he went to Indooroopilly Uniting Church and then here, St Andrews. It was amazing how much he loved the church because he was not a particularly religious man. The words he used to me one day was, "I've not been blessed by faith." So why did he go? It comes back to his love of people. He loved the community it fostered. It was about individuals being brought together and helping one another. His love of the church just grew, and in his final years of retirement and ill health, he would never miss a service. He likes bringing different facets of his life together, and the church was treated to his theatrical talent. He directed some full-on productions, A Mile and the Night Visitors was one. And there was also Oliver. He did the set design for this, he directed it, and then he cast himself in the lead role of Fagin. There's another thing that happened after he moved to Brisbane. He tried out a new business venture. He was getting over travelling and he wanted to get involved with the business close to his home in Brisbane. Mick Robinson told him about Stessel. This was a failing company up for sale and it made boats. Now Bruce didn't know anything about boats, but it was going cheaply. He could try and make it work, and if he couldn't, he could sell the land and equipment, still make a small profit. So this was how, during his midlife crisis, he bought himself a new job. He didn't know anything about boats, but he knew numbers. And it turned out the numbers were bad. They were losing money on every boat they made. One of the reasons was they were subcontracting a lot of their work out to the business next door. And that was doing quite well. So there had to be a meeting, and the next meeting that happened it's gone into legend. Bruce approached the manager of the business next door, and in typical Bruce fashion, he said, "I'm going to shoot the goose that's laying the golden egg. We're not making money, you're making money, I'm not going to continue losing money. This is all going to shut down." So the guy around the other side of the business, he said, "Well, why don't we form a partnership?" This made sense to Bruce. Okay, you know about boats, I know about running a business. We might be able to make a good business. The other man's name was Paul Phelan, and the business they started used the name Quintrex. It made a small profit just within a few months. Bruce was very proud of that. The turnover of the first year was $2 million, and the next year it was 20% more. Then it was 20% more the next year, and every year after that for 20 years straight. My dad would sometimes say he was lucky. He was at the right place at the right time. But there were a lot of other players in the marine industry at that time, and they did not turn into Quintrex. He would also heap praise on Paul Phelan. He just praised his honesty and integrity, and also said that he was just a genius at managing people and getting a factory running. But then there was the business aspect. Bruce brought with him the ethics and the knowledge of how to run a long-term business. The marine industry hadn't seen this before. Back then, there were a lot of operators doing under-the-table cash deals, but he wouldn't work like that. Everything was above board. He ensured the numbers were right, the taxes were paid, ensured that everyone was treated honestly and fairly. Suppliers soon realised what Quintrex was about, and they would bend over backwards to doing the right thing with them. On the other side, he struck up relationships with the dealers. He brought them in for conferences. He would just listen to them. They'd say, "Hey, no one's ever stopped and listened to us before." So yes, he was at the right place and at the right time, but he was definitely the right person for this. He was proud that it made money, but more than this, and I know this theme keeps coming back, he just loved seeing the people. There were those who suspected he would have kept the business running even if it wasn't making a profit, just to make the people happy. He wanted to know what they were about. If he was walking across the yard and he saw somebody sweeping the floor that he hadn't met before, he would go up, try and find out everything he could about them. He just loved seeing workers coming in and finding their niche and giving them ideas and getting them excited and seeing them being successful. In his later years, he retired from Quintrex, and nearly 30 years after starting it, he sold off his share. He still owned half the land, and so he used that as an excuse to visit Paul and the business. "Hey, I'm just a landlord, just checking up on my investment." Really, he just liked being there. So Quintrex made him money. Now, he was never flashy with the money. He liked being under the radar, but he was happy making it. And one thing he really loved doing with it was helping other people. Philanthropy was an important part of the later part of his life. There are a number of personal families in his circle who, through no fault of their own, fell on misfortune, and he would be so happy to help them get through it. There were a number of charities. He would choose charities the same way he would choose business. He wanted his contributions to be effective. He especially liked the small charities where he could personally know the people in charge. He didn't just contribute money, he was involved in giving advice. This enriched him back. He could visit places like Indonesia and Tanzania. He could get to see how he was actually helping. There was also local fundraising. There are a number of buildings at kindergartens and schools and community centres all over, and they've got buildings which have been funded by an anonymous donor. That's how he liked to be in these cases, under the radar. And he was mindful. Communities usually had fundraising committees, and he didn't want to undermine them. So he'd say, you raise half, I'll match you with the other half. As he said to me about sharing his wealth, give them enough to do something. Never give them so much they can do nothing. Now, there's one more seed he planted after making the move to Brisbane. He began his relationship with Sue. They married in 1991, and this marriage lasted for 27 years until his passing. This increased the size of his family with the addition of Rick, Monica, and Bruce Muggeridge. Bruce Muggeridge has just had knee surgery, and he's very sad to be missing this event. You can imagine the older teens staring off at one another, trying to make sense of this new person one of their parents were with, and these new kids who apparently they were now related to. It's very clever the way that Bruce and Sue managed this. Nothing was forced. Every Sunday we were invited to lunch. Great idea for teenagers. We could just show up, eat and leave. It let the relationships build up slowly. The Shepherd Muggeridge Sunday lunch just became an anchoring point of my week, every week, all throughout my 20s. Dad adored Sue, and he loved this new blended family. He loved knowing about our lives and sharing his experiences. If he saw a show he loved, he'd see it again, and he didn't have to make us come. When Apple released the first version of the iPod, he was so impressed by it, we all had to get one. He took us on overseas holidays. Now, taking the bunch of personalities that we were on overseas trips was a significant and very brave management task, but he and Sue were up to it. They brought a unit up in Coolum, right next to the beach. It was a lovely place to visit, and they shared it out to their family and close friends. It got so popular that when the unit next door to this one came up for sale, they bought that one too. It was still crowded. Dad bought a large house near the units and then bought the house next door to that. And every summer, these buildings are full with his extended family. Over the years, the 5 kids have found partners and have had kids of their own, giving him 11 grandkids. I'm sure that all of them will carry the memories of their childhood summers at Coolum for the rest of their lives. In the later years, Bruce retired from his business. Retirement did not sit easily with him. As anybody who's ever tried going on holiday with him knows, he was never very good at relaxing. And over the last few years, he has developed dementia. There's no way around this. It was very sad to watch and extremely frustrating for him. He had such a great intellect, and he was always big on self-improvements. He read so many books, including ones about the mind. Thinking Fast and Slow was one, and he especially liked The Brain That Changes Himself, which was about how the brain could heal itself. And sadly, his brain could not. He was a man who impacted so many people, and here he was, recognizing fewer and fewer of them. So yes, it was sad. Still, in spite of this, he was amazingly active. Every week for years, he went to his personal trainer, Nathan, who kept him, together with Sue and their friends Robin and Jeff, as fit as was possible. He was still doing bike rides every Tuesday morning with his friends John and Jeff. He did Zumba dancing. He still sang in 2 choirs. In the last week, he'd been to the men's shed with Gilbert. He had lunch with his old mates from school. He played his regular Friday game of tennis. And the final day before the stroke, he was here. He wouldn't miss his final day at church. As he said a lot, he wanted to make the most of every day. and to the best of his ability, he did. It's a tribute to his much-loved wife Sue and his support network that he could be so active. Now, I've spoken so much about the things he loved, but we all know that he could be quite vocal about the things that he didn't love. And one of the things that he especially didn't love was talks that went on too long. So, I'll finish on one final anecdote. Now, when he liked a story, he would tell it to everybody, sometimes again and again. So there will be people who have heard this, so forgive me, I'll tell it again anyway. In Mackay, he had friends with an 8-year-old daughter, and the woman next door lost her mother. The little girl wrote a condolence card that went, "Dear Mrs. Smith, I'm sorry your mum died." Over the page, it said, "I hope you have a better day tomorrow." He loved that story. He loved it because really, what more can you actually want? It would be nice to think that somewhere he's wishing that for each one of us.